Sitting here in my office with John Fenzel, so I just turned 19. I said, God, make a deal with you. Get me out of this mess, I'll do something good for you someday. But anyway, right as I said that, another RPG, but I kept going downward. And it all led to the most visited memorial in the United States, or maybe the world. I think 5 million visitors a year, plus.
Incredible.
I really enjoy the time I spend there. Good things happen from it.
Well, Jan, it's good to be with you this morning. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about your involvement in creating the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall. And we'll talk about the origins and the vision behind the wall. We'll talk about building the wall, its impact, its meaning, and then we'll talk about the future and what that holds.
Yes.
Great. All right, Jan, why don't you talk a little bit about growing up here in Maryland?
Yeah, I grew up in Bowie, Maryland. Very nice little place, quiet, not a lot going on there. And when I was getting out of high school, I said, well, I guess I'd do something. My parents are getting divorced. I could maybe buy a cheap car and live in it. And I said, well, then let me try to go in the Army. And the Army at the time had a special program for people who didn't want to stand in line and do all this stuff. You just kind of showed up and they'd give you a number. That's your number, US 516-74565. You were infantryman for the U.S. Army, and your bunks are right over there, and there's your rifle. Always keep your rifle clean, because we're not preparing you for some demonstration. You're going to be in combat within 10 days of your arrival in Vietnam. The guys I was with in Vietnam, we were a mortar platoon. We had 3 big guns. We would hit various targets every day. Targets for us to hit. Some would be at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 1969. It's called Swinluck, about 60 miles from Saigon. So this time every year, I get very emotional because I was the subject of a very well-trained group of North Vietnamese soldiers. So day 1, May 27th, we're in this battle that went on for 5-6 hours. They're the rocket-propelled grenades, and they were picking us off in different locations and changing. It's just total chaos, you know. I mean, helicopters would roll over and fire grenade launchers, everything you can imagine that you can fit in helicopters. And it was so sad because we had this medic, and he was going to be a veterinarian, but he felt he should do his duty for his country. And he's just a great guy, a big, huge guy from Minnesota. He'd been a good football player. He would have been a great veterinarian. Animals loved him, everybody loved him. And unfortunately, he got shot right through here, came out the back of his head. He did survive, and I said, are you going to be okay? And he says, Scruggs, I'm going to be getting free drinks for the rest of my life. So, a lot of nice people. Everybody said, look, we're going to have another meeting with the enemy today. They're going to be all over the place. They seem more organized than us. And so I said, there's got to be something that will help me make the odds a little better in my favor. And that's when I came up with the idea of using the Army poncho as a bulletproof vest, not really bullets, but shrapnel. It would stop the shrapnel. You put it over your body and it's got these little wings and perfect for rainstorms. But when you fold it up, you can get about that much and that thick. And so I put it all together. Somebody asked me what I'm doing now. I said, all I know is we're outnumbered. That's how I put it beside me. A more poetic person could describe it. But it just seemed like things were moving really fast. It was in a hole, and I put rounds in the gun, and I was looking for targets, you know. 3 more guys joined me. I told them where I thought we needed to shoot. All of a sudden, my M16 gave away my position. And so I ran by a tree. And right as I got up to run behind the tree, the RPG went off. But the RPG missed. The second round, didn't miss anything. And then, boom, the RPG hits right here. 3 feet away. And it knocks my helmet off, and I was hit, and I was floating after that into the trees, like a horror movie or something like that. So I just turned 19. I said, God, I make a deal with you. Get me out of this mess. I'll do something good for you someday. But anyway, right as I said that, another RPG, but I kept going downward. At the treetops, and I just kept going downward. And I looked around and somebody was yelling, medics, Scruggs hit. I was completely debilitated then. I could barely, they're here. But most of the shrapnel hit my butt. So it's fantastic because there's nothing in there that you can really hurt. Or anything like that. It's just, so they called me and everyone started laughing at me. And they said, well, we'll never say you again, Scruggs. Congratulations. Oh, man. Scruggs, you beat all records. You got your Purple Heart. And I says, well, you can get another one. I now have about 12 pieces of shrapnel in me right now. And it's been a great adventure because it was really kind of a rendezvous with death. I was sent to the convalescent center, the Army established, and everybody in that center was there because from a bullet wound or shrapnel wound. Nothing else. So it was very pleasant, and I got to meet a lot of the guys who were wounded, and they said, sure, why don't you stay here for an extra couple of weeks. So I left Cameron Bay, got on the helicopters and headed back into the jungle, and I went back to my unit. And right as I left, or it was at night, there were explosions, and the North Vietnamese had a submarine. They let their guys out of a submarine, maybe 5 guys, 6 guys. But none of the patients had any firearms. They said that's not Army policy. We have a gun cabinet over here. And so as I leave this situation, I once again escaped death. But I know you can't do it that many times. It was nice to get back to my unit. Everybody was surprised to see me. And we were way in the middle of the jungle. And I was really impressed at the fact that these were all 2-year guys. They took the Army program. Some of them got wounded. I just was hoping we could get out of there. So, war is hell. Nothing was attractive about it. And I had some things happen over there that weren't very pleasant. And I learned a lot from the experience.
What year did you leave?
1970. I became recognized as an expert on post-traumatic stress disorder. There weren't many people aware of it, but it was not easy.
Can you talk about around 1979, that's when you sensed that the country still carried this open wound from Vietnam. So what convinced you, what was the catalyst to create a memorial?
That's 79. I'm flopping around here, I was working at government programs for disadvantaged people, summer jobs. The most uninspiring thing I've ever done. My wife and I went to the movies, The Deer Hunter with Robert De Niro. He's really a great actor. That morning, I said, I can do this. Because people will be so attracted by the idea of the names. They'll come to see the names. And so, great idea, I'm going to do this. And press conference. And here I am stuck in the middle of nowhere. I have this job, which we needed. We really didn't have any money. My father died just a few months earlier, and he left me all the money he had, which was a life insurance policy for $10,000. That allowed me to start the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I hired a lawyer, we drew up articles of incorporation. We had senators, people, Max Cleland got involved, and a lot of very respected people in the Senate. So whenever we had problems, we had some good people to be involved. For 6 months, it was high energy. We became very clever using the media. Whenever there was an idea, like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, have a memorial open to the public. I had no idea what it was going to look like. But we solved that problem, and we solved other problems too. Nothing's easy in D.C.
Talk about the design for the memorial and how that came to be.
I had PTSD, and a lot of people have it. It's just how your body reacts to seeing things that are violent. Car crashes, shootings, terrible things happen. Almost everybody has big problems as a result of it. So it was using that as the base of knowledge, bringing it to the Vietnam Memorial. And Maya Lin did it. She won because of the way it was designed and the openness of it and the beauty. And the Buddhist religion has thoughts on death and so forth. So I read some of them, very inspiring and mysterious. Maya Lin referred to the memorial as a rift in the earth, a cut in the earth, but it's healing. It's healing over time. So that's just, the way she thinks is so brilliant. And that was in her mind, and we signed off on it. Sounds perfect to us, because she had won the competition for the Vietnam Wall, the largest competition ever held in the history of Western civilization. And that's a fact. The Eiffel Tower, close, but it's more like 350, 400. St. Louis Arch, not even close.
She called it a rift in the earth. Critics would call it a black gash of shame. Describe some of those critics and the toughest face-to-face meeting with an opponent and how you turned that conversation.
Yeah, you have to realize, now it seems brilliant, but back before we had it built on the mall, we didn't know, I didn't know if this thing was going to work or not. I mean, maybe the enemy guy is going to win this thing, so we got to get our defenses ready and some offensive operations. So we got a Rocky Blyer, football player, who'd been badly wounded in Vietnam, a really nice guy. He became kind of a spokesman. So it became a little bureaucracy. At the same time, we're raising money. We're getting $1 million from the Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, pretty significant things. I was in San Francisco with Country Joe McDonald. The great tragedy of this whole idea was Prospero. He was one of the first billionaires in America. He wasn't born into it or anything like that. But I persuaded him to fund the design competition. He's a very intense guy, and he gets what he wants. And you don't stand in his way. We tried to reason with him.
He came out as an opponent.
Yeah, came out and I says, "Now I have skin in the game. I funded the competition, and you're going to give me my damn money back, because what you've done is outrageous." So we just kind of smiled and said, "Yeah." And we found out that what we needed was something called a construction permit, because the design had been approved. Everything was online. All we needed was a construction permit. But we couldn't get this construction permit because the Secretary of the Interior, James Watt, said, "Not conservative enough. I want to see more flags." And so one of our trusted people, a guy named Tom Shull, he was a graduate of West Point and is the president of the Army Exchange, Navy Exchange.
He's a White House fellow.
We sat down and said, once you get the construction permit, they can't stop you. But if Congress leaves for a week, you're stuck. The legislation will be introduced. So this is pretty serious. And we needed a different kind of answer to it. And that would be, how do we get the construction permit without them knowing it? So Tom Shull, who I told you about, he went to the Secretary of the Interior's office, working with Senator James Baker, old guys on the Hill. So we always had his support. We had the support of Ronald Reagan too. But Tom Shull basically said, "Okay, I'll do it. Might cost me a job, but we'll do it. Let's go." So we sent him up there. And the Assistant Secretary for Interior said, "Okay, I know you guys are. You went with a nice memorial. Secretary of Interior thinks it's bad. So we're not going to give you a construction permit. So why don't you get out of here?" The Secretary's guy, Tom Shull, said, "We have a better idea. Maybe you should get out of here. And I think we've got enough political support that we can put your job on ice. You're gone." He's very aggressive, and they kind of train them how to deal with difficult people. So a guy takes his, "Here you go. Congratulations."
Talk about beating Washington's clock and how you had the groundbreaking in March of '82 and then the dedication in November, correct?
Yes. One of the most extraordinary things that's ever happened. So we stopped worrying about it, but these guys wanted a piece of me. And 5 days later, I had people on the mall with heavy construction equipment. And right where you see the Vietnam Memorial, I had a made it look like an airstrike had called on with heavy artillery because there are just these big holes everywhere. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. But of course, once we got underway, things are even better. So there was really no precedent. And then it comes time to take revenge on me and some of the people who got involved with me. And all we could do was just say, we think, Mr. Perot, you're really going to like this design. We got to build it first. You have to trust us. And he said, what the hell is going on? He said, I don't like this. They're already building construction. We might go to jail for not building it. So he was angry. Some other people were angry. And he said, look, we can stop construction, these guys, by having a temporary restraining order, And I said, God, we're in trouble. How do we get out of this mess? And my advisors at the time said, just keep doing what you're doing because they can't stop you now. I'm getting advice from Elliot Richardson, one of the greatest lawyers of all time, a James Baker kind of guy. And that's what he said to me, Jan. He said, even if they really wanted to stop you, they can't do it. You can't do it. Why don't you just go smoke a cigar somewhere and back in a week?
You talked about the dedication, any surprises that day, how the crowd applauded openly.
I was on top of the world. I had 50,000 people in front of me. It was the best dedication anyone's ever had to a memorial. We had 50,000 people there, crunched together in front of the wall, people standing on top of the wall, and everything you could possibly imagine.
Ronald Reagan, right?
Yeah, Ronald Reagan. He was a charming guy, got that kind of down-home look.
What did that reaction reveal about how the nation wanted to remember the Vietnam War?
Well, that's a very good question. And I'm not sure how to address it, but the memorial was there. People started coming to it, and many people just sat there in front of a name. One guy left at the wall a pair of Texas cowboy boots that were definitely 30, 40 years old. And they were right next to this guy's name, and it seemed like there was a little handkerchief or something hanging down. But then all of a sudden, days later, there were hundreds and thousands, and ultimately 50, 500,000. That's what they say.
Of those objects, which ones do you remember the most that have been left at the wall?
A lot of these little private schools and so forth are very good at teaching kids how to write. And some of the ones they have, one says, I'm a 14-year-old kid, but if I could, I would take a bullet for you. Young people who really want to connect with the wall or patriotism. It's good. A lot of good things happened from it.
You've called the wall a mirror. Can you talk about that? And what do you hope a 17-year-old on a field trip to the wall, staring at that wall, will be staring back at him or her?
Yeah. Well, it's a dramatic place, and many times the kids from age 14 on are there with their teacher, and they all have done research on people from their own town. A couple of years ago, they pronounced it. Over 5 million people come to visit them. And why? This is not a regular monument like anything else in D.C. This involves people dying for the country, people getting drafted. It connects people from this era to another era. Hopefully we will not see any more big wars in our lifetime. I would be really hurt if that were to occur. Let's hope not.
What do you hope the legacy of the wall will be for future generations? What do you hope that they will take away from it?
Well, there are certain monuments, memorials, they never die. Think about the pyramids of Egypt. Think about the great memorial, the St. Louis Arch design competition. So it's fantastic. So we get the memorial built, people go in with their lives. Okay, this is great. What do I do now? And then once this thing ended, I've got this 500-foot memorial, and I'm kind of in charge of it. I said, you need money. So I went to see a guy named David Bonnier. He's a really respected congressman from South Dakota. And he kept everything in line and kept us on track. And I said, look, we need a couple $1 million. And he said, all I can do is try. And he went right there on the floor of the House of Representatives and said, we need help with the Vietnam Memorial, we need some repairs, time goes on. So why don't you give us a couple $1 million? They gave us a commemorative coin, and they went for $8 a piece. But we got $2 million out of it. We had several people make replicas of the Vietnam Wall. They're all over the country. And you see these traveling Vietnam memorials. there's a lot of them. A lot of them have just been retired and they're sitting in front of VA hospitals, that sort of thing. So,
Talk a little bit about your illness then.
yeah, you know, it's funny how our stress has an effect on you. And this was really having an effect on me, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And so 35 years after the wall was built, I'm sitting in my house here and I can't get up. As a matter of fact, I was in a coma. We got a hospital. And the doctor took my wife into a room and said, look, your husband's not going to make it. If it's okay with you, we'd like to pull the plug. She said, it's not okay with me. It's not okay at all. And I had some people like John Fenzel give me a hand. Even though I was in a coma, I was still getting people praying for me and all that. I was in a coma for 31 days at the Annapolis Hospital. And one day I woke up. All's good.
Well, thank you, Jan. Thank you for everything you've done.